Hey, welcome back to Mocktails with Marina. I'm your host, Marina, and today we'll be speaking with Kendall Bierman of Kendall Bee Therapy. Of course, non-alc beverages get a lot of attention, but there are many other types of businesses and service providers in this space here to help people in their own unique ways. So today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. So thank you so much for being here today, Kendall.
Thank you so much for having me, Marina. I'm really excited to be here and talk about mental health and sobriety.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and start with the backstory, the why. How did you get here? So give us a little bit of a glimpse into what got you started with your therapy practice.
Sure. So this is it's like a loaded question. I'll try to keep it short and get to the main points. So I have had anxiety for as long as I can remember, like since I was a little kid. And when I got dropped off at college, I think I was so overwhelmed and out of my depth that I very quickly began relying on alcohol to ease my anxiety. And I started to feel like just very reliant on it. And I think I was so inhibited and anxious socially that that was like how I made friends, by drinking and going out. And that kind of took on its own life of its own. And I went from just drinking before going out and pre-gaming to then pre-gaming, going to lunch with new people because I was nervous, or taking a shot before going to class because I was nervous about public speaking or sharing. And so it really evolved and ended up with me drinking almost every day. At the end, yes, to drinking every day. Like I would wake up feeling hungover from the night before and would have a shot, and I would keep it up throughout the day. And so my college experience was really challenging. I took a medical leave from my first school. I ended up transferring to another college. I have some failed classes, some withdrawals. Um, I had some fun with going out, but most of it really kind of, my self-esteem really deteriorated, because I didn't want to quit drinking. I felt like I didn't know any other sober people at age 19 or 20, and I didn't know how to have a social life without it. And I wanted to be like, quote, normal. So I really tried to keep drinking, and I would have these little moments where I'd go to therapy and stop drinking for 30, 60, 90 days, and then would end up drinking again. Um, I somehow finished college, but it was, like I said, it was really challenging for me, and it kind of kicked me in the butt. So when I finished school, I had like one final binge drinking episode that led me to, I ended up going to the hospital for withdrawal. And I think that was the final rock bottom. Like they say you have to hit rock bottom, but I had hit many bottoms before then. But it was something about it showing up so physical in me that I felt I just couldn't deny it anymore. And I didn't want to. So I ended up going to inpatient to rehab, and I've been sober since, almost 7 years. And when I did go to inpatient, I like knew then and there that I wanted to be a therapist, even though it was so early on. I was like, I had so much to work on in myself, but in there, I was like, when I was in college, it was so hard. I didn't know anyone that was young and sober or struggling in that way. And I felt like maybe I could be a good role model or be a therapist to somebody who felt like they could connect to them. And in college, I majored in psychology because I was like, there's all these things wrong with me. Like, let's major in as close as I can get to majoring in myself. So yeah, I went to rehab. I maintained my sobriety, and I ended up, I went to grad school. I worked for a group practice, and now recently I opened up my own practice.
What an inspiring story, Kendall. This to me is, thank you for so much for sharing this story because it's such a gift. It's to know someone who has not only been there but is there to actually guide people through to the other side is it's beautiful because a lot of times a lot of people work, they see sobriety as something that is just beyond their life. Like maybe that was for someone else because how do I fill that time? How do I fill that space? How do I fill that hole in my heart or that pit in my stomach? Or, how can I go to the grocery store without getting a panic attack, right? So how did you find fun? Like, what was it like in those early first days of sobriety for you to find fun and find like lack of boredom, right? But like joy in things.
Yeah, that is such a good question because that's like the key to staying sober is having a life worth living. Because when I was first giving up alcohol, I felt like I was losing so much, which I think made it really hard to get sober in the first place. Like I was giving up my social life, I was giving up my fun. So the first couple months, honestly, I don't know if I even had that much fun. I did a lot of therapy, which I needed, and I learned a lot of really great skills. But as I started to feel more confident in the skills I had learned and maintaining, staying sober, a lot of my fun came from connecting with other people. I realized that I could have relationships with other people without drinking. And I started to feel like a connection to people that I hadn't felt maybe since I was like a kid, because there was no substances that was kind of getting in the way. Like it's fun partying with people, but it's not all that deep. And
Right.
right. So I was connecting with a lot of other people who were also sober. And so who understood where I was coming from. And I was forming these deep connections. And you also have to find other things to do. Like it's very easy to go to a bar. That's a really easy option. Just say, let's get
Hmm.
a drink. But when you don't have that, you have to be more intentional about what you're picking and choosing to do. So I lived in New York City at the time. Right now I'm in just outside of the city, but there's so much to do in New York City that isn't just drinking. And so I went online and I looked up all these different things that I could do. I went to trapeze, like I did trapezing one day. I
So cool.
like right like in one of those rooms where you just destroy everything in it. Like there's a lot to do. And so I made a kind of like a bucket list of different things that I wanted to try and do, and I did them. And I discovered a new way of having fun.
Ooh, I'm curious, in that, did you end up finding any new like hobbies, or maybe not even hobbies, but like new personal interests that you still have to this day that you didn't before?
Yeah. So, what I think is interesting, a lot of the hobbies that I have today, not all of them, but a lot of them are things that I actually really liked when I was younger, like maybe in middle school or early high school, that I lost touch with because
Mm.
drinking became my only hobby. Um, and so, when I put down drinking, I started playing a lot of tennis again, which I like. Tennis was a really big part of my life. And so now I play that and I meet a lot of friends doing that as well. I started playing pickleball, which wasn't around back then, but I started doing that. I crochet now, which sounds really lame, but I love it
No,
because
so cool.
I know, because I have anxiety and ADHD. So like sitting still is just naturally hard for me. So if I can be crocheting or doing something with my hands, I love that. I love reading these days. What else? I love exploring restaurants, especially restaurants that have a great mocktail list.
Mm. Fun hobbies. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
know that all these things might sound scary at first, right? Like if you're in those early stages and you're like, yo, like, but I have social anxiety and I haven't figured that part out yet. Like I remember it was October 2019 when I quit drinking. And I was one of those people that was like, I don't have a problem. Like it's just that I want to be a better athlete. But then as I got more sober and I looked back, I was like, oh no, I definitely there were some things I was incredibly numb to. And what I found very difficult, because of course I got sober right before the pandemic. So I was like, well, I'm already here, so I got to double down on this.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was having a hard time like seeing color in life. And like, side note, at the time I was living in Vegas. So, yeah, I mean,
Oh,
it's a desert.
wow.
So it's
Oh my
literally
God.
not, it's not very colorful unless you're looking at flowers specifically. And so during the shutdown, when we couldn't even go anywhere, and you look outside and you're like, there's a brown mountain, like there's nothing on it. Like what do you do? So I would go on the little trails and I would just try to find flowers and take photos of them. And
Mm-hmm.
like at first I was like, well, maybe I'll just be a photographer. I don't know. No, I don't want to be a photographer. That's not interesting to me at all. But
Yeah.
like I like to do like our content, right? But like that's it. Like for me, it was literally I was trying to be like I was documenting examples of color to remind, because I was just so, how to put, like, dreary at first. So I love how you mentioned that it's just like you don't even need to know like it's not like you have to, it's not like you were a trapeze artist before, but you went and tried it. Like you were like, hey, let's go try these new things. Have you found, I know there's a lot of people out there who, they fear by drinking they'll lose people who are close to them that don't understand, or it's not that they're not supportive, they just like don't get it. So, what would you say to anyone listening out there who is like, oh, like I know that this is something like I want to do, but I don't know about those who are around me.
Yeah, I hear that a lot and I relate to that. I think if they're a good friend, like your friendship doesn't have to go away. And if it does, if they can't be friends with you because you're not partying with them anymore, it sounds like it probably wasn't that deep a friendship to begin with. Um, but for the friends that are like they're supportive, but it's just going to be different. I think there has to be some acknowledgement that your relationships are going to be a bit different, right? Like maybe it was easy for the two of you or you and your group of friends to just go out, and you can still go out, but in the beginning of sobriety you might need to create some space between and not maybe go out for a time, or maybe even tell your friend like, hey, I'm really working on not drinking right now, and like I love you and you're my friend, but like I need to figure some things out right now, so I'm not going out. And so maybe your friendship shifts, and some of the friendships that, like, yes, I lost a couple friends, and I realized that those friendships just didn't have all that much substance. But for the friendships that I did keep, we got so much closer. We ended up finding new things to do together, going on walks, or really just it became like more wholesome the way we got to know each other.
Yeah.
And now I do go out with those friends. So not all the time, because I'm like, I don't always have it in me, but you can like have that relationship too, where you still go out with them. But it might not be as often, and it's not going to be the main thing you do anymore.
Mm, that's such a good point. And you just like are opening my memories that I'm like forgetting from that early stage. Cause like I
Yeah.
too remember being like, cause again in Vegas, like people are like a lot of people drink, a lot of people just don't care about a lot of like self-improvement, right? Because they're very much like just working to get the next gig, essentially.
Yeah.
And the first time I had one of my friends who was already sober, and it's not like I didn't tell her nothing. Like I was just like, hey, let's hang out. And again, it was pandemic time. So it was only at a park. We were walking around
Mhm.
and, and she had her little dog in a stroller. It was so cute. And I remember that day meant the world to me. It opened up my eyes to see that there were so many other, like, I was like, when was the last time I walked around I walked around a lake and then gave some bread to a duck. Like, when was the last time I hadn't
Yeah.
done that since before I was sober? And I had no idea that I hadn't even invited those cute little wholesome moments in until
Hmm.
the space was made, which is so cute. And it gets me to thinking, right? So, all right, we're getting through that first part, right? We're starting to feel good. We're like, all right, we can start to have fun again. And now maybe we're at the point in our sobriety where I know many people, most people who come to our business, they are people who are either sober themselves or just definitely drinking in moderation, or they have
Uh-huh.
someone close in their lives who had dealt with alcoholism. And so they are at the point in their life where they want to give back. They're like, okay, I want to start a business and provide some product or service to, help other people with their sobriety. Now, this is a double-edged sword, right? Because of course, this is the coolest thing ever. But on the
Yeah.
other hand, opening a business is the deepest soul work I know I've ever done. At least to
A
this point,
really
right?
good point.
There are other phases of life, right? Like becoming a mother and all those things that are a totally other level of
Yeah.
depth. But for this specific like level of depth here, opening a business, for those of you who've never done it, I mean, like, since you're your own boss, like the market is what trains you and helps you figure out what's right or wrong with your brand, not you, your brand,
Yeah.
right? And that's where things get tricky. So, let's talk about that for a second. What would you say? Let's say there's someone who's like, "Hey, I really want to do this. I want to open a business. I'm worried about my sobriety though. Like, is this going to be triggering? What should I expect going into this journey?"
I haven't talked about this. So I love that you're asking me this, because I feel like I haven't even been, my business hasn't even been open a full year yet. So I'm still in it. There's a lot to consider. And if I were helping someone who's thinking about starting a business and they were sober, they would need to have information. And like, for one, there's this great idea, like, I don't want to work for anybody else. I want to work for myself. And that's so freeing. And yes, it is, but I've never worked for a harder boss before than myself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to unplug. And so, yes, I think it can be triggering for a person's sobriety. I have noticed that for myself. And like I said, like, I'm almost 7 years sober. I feel very confident in my sobriety. That being said, this has been a really anxiety producing time for me. There's so much uncertainty when it comes to opening a business. And that, of course, is triggering for anybody. And for a lot of people, they begin drinking due to underlying mental health issues, whether it's depression or anxiety or something else. And so when you are at risk or you're vulnerable to that underlying mental health issue, it makes sense that that would be potentially triggering to want to engage in old habits that helped to manage that, which in this case would be drinking.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would really recommend is like networking. And I know networking can seem like a job sometimes, but it doesn't have to be. Like, network with other people who are business owners or who are new business owners too, because they really understand what you're going through. Just like how if you're in early sobriety, you want to surround yourself with other people who are sober. It's also nice to surround yourself with other people who know the struggles of opening up a business, who really get it. And there are a lot of sober business owners out there too that who will get it on a whole other level.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love Networking is so important because sobriety, I feel like, or rather, addiction is something that happens in private, and sobriety is something that can really relish in when you are in connection with others. I
Yeah.
know oftentimes I go into meetings and, when we very first started and no one knew my name, right? Because I was too busy working at one establishment in one place, I had no online presence. So when I first started taking meetings, I was like, well, I know I have the talent. I know I have the skill for these things, but none of these people know me yet. So I
Yeah.
would go into every call having to like really center myself at first and be like, okay, let's see, is this nerves or is this intuition? 9 times out of 10, because this industry is incredible. In general, non-alc, so many people get it because it's kind of a prereq to sell some of these things
Yeah.
sometimes. So it automatically, I mean, I'm telling you, I've had some deep conversations on just my intro calls, like discovery calls with people. This podcast, I mean, for us, when we started, we were like, how do we like share that we know all this stuff? Like, how do we show people that? And how do we get in connection and do all these things at once? So, this podcast, to be so clear with everybody who's listening, like, I don't think for 1 second I'm like this host that knows like what I'm doing all the time, right? Like sometimes I ask questions and I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes I ask them because I know where it's going, and other times I'm like, well, I don't even know if that was a good question or not. We'll find out, because the only way to figure out the whatever's like holding you up is to go through it, right? Not get stuck in that feeling. And I
Yeah.
feel like oftentimes when the going gets rough and those triggers come up, I feel like it's one of two things. One, there's a confrontation we haven't yet made with the self, right? So we should just take a look real quick. Or maybe that's like, hey, it's time that you need to delegate. Like, you actually, maybe it's because
Yeah.
that's not your like your however whatever your belief system is, but like, I believe that like if you have a talent, like you came here to do something with that, right? So if your talent is in like something creative, don't be stuck in the books, like hire for that, right? So
Yeah.
there's these intuitive pings that tell you stuff. But I'm curious for you, how what's it like for you to like really listen to your gut feelings, like as someone with anxiety? What's the difference between anxiety and a gut feeling that's like, that's actually a red flag?
In business or in general?
I think both is, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So, you know, that's something that I still actually sometimes struggle with. And I'll just like admit that. Like, that's a lifelong process, I think, where my go-to is often anxiety. And so I really have to kind of dig deep and wonder, like, is this anxiety based in like reality and like my intuition, or is it based in fear? And so I really have to like check the facts. And if there aren't really facts to back it up, it's a good sign that it's just like fear based. And a fear-based reaction like sometimes is healthy, but oftentimes when you're someone with anxiety, it's holding you back. um and so it's really like questioning like what's the information here, what are the facts, like why am I feeling this way. And I still see a therapist myself, like, and I love her. And so if I'm really stuck, like I have her, I have friends, I have people that I can run that by. But it can be hard to start to trust your intuition, I think, especially in early sobriety. Like I didn't have any trust in myself. I felt that I had proven beyond a doubt that I cannot trust myself, um, through like my behaviors of drinking. And so that took time for me to rebuild, and still sometimes is challenging. But that's why I think it's, it's important to have support and to like learn different skills and ways of checking in with yourself. I don't know if that really answered your question, but I
No, it
tried.
did. It was like it almost brought a tear to my eye because it just goes to show like you don't have to like convince yourself that you have to be the expert to start.
Yeah.
Like even if you were, I'm sure people with like all of like beyond PhD education, I'm sure they still have therapists. Every coach I've ever worked with as a coach, as a consultant, they have coaches and consultants. We have coach, like, like we all have our own support, even if our
Yeah.
business and our reason for being here is to support people. Like if that's our service-based business model, like it's okay. You're not any less valid by reaching for your support because if anything, that support then you can
I
continue
think
to,
especially then, if
right.
you're in the business of supporting other people, you better have a good support system.
Mm, yes. I'm snapping if you can't hear that. It's so important. If you are supporting people, you need to support yourself.
Yes.
That brings me right to the bartenders in this industry, the kava tenders, the people who are, people we all know traditional bar culture, very normal for someone to be drunk at 2 a.m., professing all of their feelings to the bartender. And when I was a kava tender, things did not change. And in fact, they got even deeper and more
Wow.
wild. Yeah, and I think it was partially because we were serving kava, and kava is a very opening drink. People feel very calm, so they tend, it's not like a truth serum, but rather it
Yeah.
keeps you calm to where you feel like you can connect with people easier. So because of that, people would be like, hey, yeah, I'd like to have, this green drink. And I'm just curious, like, when did you start believing in God? Like that, like it would just be no big deal.
Wow. I
So
like love that though. Like talk about deep
yeah.
connections.
It's cool. It's absolutely cool. So long as you have boundaries. So
Yes.
I always had pretty good boundaries by the time I got behind the bar because when I worked at my first kava bar specifically, I was 27, or 26 when I got hired. But when I had hired some college kids onto the staff, right? This was their first time kind of dealing with this. Luckily, we always hired people who were like regulars who already knew, so they wouldn't
Yeah.
just be thrown into the fire. But point of this is like we ended up spending a significant, substantial amount of time at our staff meetings talking about how we can support people,
Yeah.
whether because the with any addiction comes a myriad of other things, right? So we would have people who would be in between homes, in between rehabs, didn't really know where to go. So we'd also end up being this like like info center for where
Social
people can
workers.
go. Yeah, like unofficially. And luckily we had some social workers who like to hang out there. So we were like, oh, here's our resident social worker here that you can come talk to.
Yeah.
But all of that being said, if there's someone who is interested in opening a bar and they hadn't even thought of this component, right? And they're like, dang, like what should I do to prepare my staff? So what would you say? What would you want a non-alc bartender to just be prepared for if people are ready to like trauma dump on them and they've never experienced that?
Yeah. Well, you said the word boundaries, right? Boundaries 101. I think I would like hire someone to come in like and do a whole like presentation or something about like how to set boundaries. And that takes a lot of practice and like it's not like shutting people down when they start talking to you, but being like, I think there's a way of saying it of like, I really appreciate all you're saying. Like, I could really relate to that. That being said, like, I'm working right now, or I just don't have the time to like hear all of it. And, or saying, like, that sounds so important. Like, do you have anyone in your life you can talk to about that? And that's really hard to do in the moment. And that takes practice. But I think being prepared for that and having sort of like a script in mind of what you might say would be really helpful.
I agree with that. And it's not about having like dry corporate policy of, hello,
Yeah.
here's what you do. No, it's just like it's being a human with like, okay, here's what we typically, here are the resources we have, or I'm so sorry, or
Oh, I loved what you said about resources. I think offering somebody like resources in the moment, because then it shows that you really are listening to them and you care. You just are the person to take all that.
yeah. So it's okay to be like a kiosk, like an info desk, right? So my recommendations are if you're in a downtown area, always have like homeless resources or substance abuse
Mm.
resources. I've had some people, I had one case of domestic like abuse, like
Wow.
a person who was worried. So there was a women's shelter that we just looked up for her. And I think someone ended up paying for her fare to just get there. It was something, it was literally because it was just such a sweet community. Everyone wanted to help each other and take care. So, yeah, just think about what are the common area or common problems in your areas and what are resources that you can kind of put together ahead of time, even if it's a packet or a QR code or just something for people who are coming in because that is the name of the non-alc game. Like you're going to get a lot of people. But that being said, something that I thought was a very important boundary, and different businesses can think differently, but in what a big like mantra we had in our establishment was we are the treat, not the treatment. So if people tried to come in and self-medicate on all of our non-alc options, the functional ones, and we felt like something like we had a serving limit first off, number of grams we could sell every day,
Mhm.
but also we had like yeah, that heart limit, right? Where we wanted to make sure people knew. So, all of that being said, I'm curious for you what it was like since we're talking about boundaries, you know, and in therapy, like you are in the, like you have to have the best boundaries, right? Because,
Yeah.
you're helping people with something so personal, but you're not taking it home every day, right? I know that that's something that can be very hard for people in this industry where their heart goes out to those that didn't end up coming back. So this is a sad thing that we'd had so many positive stories of so many people who made it, but for the like hundreds that do, there's plenty that unfortunately don't quite make it. So there were some individuals in our community who didn't end up showing up again. And that ended up being a hard thing to bear at first when it's not something that you kind of anticipate. Because again, you're
Yeah.
going into this industry. So, talking on those boundaries, what would you say when it comes to like, you want to care about people, but also there's a business that you need to protect yourself. And, but also like, this is just the reality. Some people make it and some don't. Like, what would you say to people who might be kind of struggling with that right now as a business owner?
No one can be any one person's everything. And if you try to be, you will become either resentful or you will have like no boundaries and no life of your own. It's like sometimes hard, especially as like a therapist, you want to, at least I sometimes wish I could just fix a person's problem a lot of times. Um, but you really can't fix another person's problems. They have to be the one to do it. And especially in addiction, like you can't force somebody to get sober no matter how hard you try.
Hmm.
And just like that, like business is the same. If I have a client who's texting me multiple times throughout the day at a certain point, like I'm not going to be completely unresponsive if it's a reasonable time that they're reaching out. But if it becomes too much, it's actually not benefiting them. They're becoming over reliant on you, And as me as a therapist, I'm probably going to start to become resentful and annoyed because my personal time is being used to, to help this person. And then I'm not going to be the best version of myself as a therapist to them. So boundaries sometimes can seem strict or harsh, like, well, but I want to help them. But to best help somebody, you have to set boundaries. Like, imagine a child who just wants to eat like fun dip for every single meal and wants to ride in the middle of the street on a bike with no helmet. Like, you'd say, well, I don't want them to be mad. I want them to have a happy life. But is that actually doing them a favor? And I'm not trying to say we should treat adults like children. However, like, people thrive with boundaries and knowing the limits.
Oh, 100%. I would love to give some examples. You mentioned texting here, right? Some companies, some businesses are super cool with it, right? So then if you as a business owner are like, okay, I'm designing my business, and maybe you are someone who gets like triggered by texts. I know I am sometimes. Like I I like it when my things are in buckets so that I can clock out. And if someone was to text me or call me on my personal number, I would just feel compelled to throw the business out the window because it would be very difficult, right? So, for example, there's nothing that says that you have to build your business in a certain way just because someone else's business is built a certain way, right? So, one thing that we talk a lot about in the modern mocktail when we're consulting with people and like helping them come up with their business plan, we're helping them sharpen their business vision. We're like, okay, but before we start helping other people, what are the boundaries you need in your life? So, do you want to be around for your children? Okay, I'm sorry, you can't be working the bar at night. Like,
Yeah.
what do you if do you want to, oh, you want to be able to go back to school? Okay, I'm sorry, you can't manage your own establishment then. You're gonna have to hire someone to do that. Oh, you want to go travel and do these okay. There's a give and take for whatever the thing that you want to do is. It's not that you can't do all the things with your business. It's just the design has to be built where those boundaries are set. And what we found was when we were kind of experimenting with our business model and we had some client contracts be more open than others, we actually found our client success rates were significantly higher for those that we were extremely strict with enforcing our boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, we ended up actually teaching them the lesson that they needed through us showing our boundaries. So, point of that is, I
That's
know it,
true.
yeah, like it feels scary. Sometimes you're like, especially when it comes to business, right? Because if it's just personal boundaries, you're like, oh, I made them mad at me. That hurts, right? But like when it's your business and you're like, oh, they're mad at me and now I can't pay my rent. Like that's where all of a sudden you start to feel like it's easier to compromise your boundaries. When in reality, usually if we find a client who crosses boundaries, we actually end up finding that if we just say, okay, goodbye, not aligned, let's find
Yeah.
someone who can follow the rules, we have more success and everybody's happier.
Yeah, it's really hard as a therapist because,
Yeah.
like, if someone is not working as a client, let's say either they're just not the right fit or level of care, or they need a higher level of care than me, whatever it is that it's not working, like, to refer them out or to say like this isn't working, that's really hard because that's like I do, yes, I'm a therapist, but I'm also a business owner and I also have bills to pay. And it's scary. Like, well, if I say no to this person, is another one going to come? Am I going to get another client? Um, so that is really true. And even like asking for payment from a client for some reason feels so like scary as a therapist.
Yeah.
It's like, well, don't you like? And I hear this from people like, well, your fees like are kind of high. Like, I thought you cared about helping people. And it's
Mm.
like, well, of course I care about helping people. And I also need to help myself because I can't
Hmm.
help anyone if I can't make ends meet.
Absolutely. And you're setting an incredible example for, hey, yeah, this is how much you're worth actually. Like
Yeah.
like you're not worth just some like $20 side conversation. Like you are worth a legitimate amount of investment because like you are the best investment you can make in this lifetime. Like
Yeah.
that, I feel like that act in and of itself, it's so hard at first, but like because I always used to be I had a scarcity mindset about certain things, about like,
Yes.
oh, well, I'll figure things out for myself, but I'll like pay to fix these other things outside of me, right? And then the moment I learned how to start like investing, I'm like, okay, I'm going to pay for my first $5,000 year-long retainer with my own consultant. And the first time I did that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so scary and so big. But what did it do? I mean, it we got more than 10x on that return
Mm,
within with less than the year. So point of that story is I feel like if anybody out there feels like you want help, whether that's therapy, consulting, anything, you want to hire people, you just want to try something new, I feel like it's I know it can be a little scary to put yourself out there, but if you think about it, like you're giving yourself this little treat and like you're this, you know, if you think about the whole lifetime, you're worth more than $1 million building, right? Like you are worth more than a dress made of gold, right? Like you're worth more than these things that you attach all of this money value to. You're like, oh yeah, that's worth a lot. But what, you're worth nothing? Like that's silly.
yeah,
It's good to retrain your brain to say, hey, I am worthy of putting all of this effort and love and investment into.
definitely. The
Yeah.
scarcity mindset is real as a business owner. It's
Yeah, it really is.
it makes it hard to say no to things when you should.
hmm So, all of this being said, Kendall, I could talk to you forever and have I could do a whole side podcast with you because I feel like there's a million things we could talk about. But all of that being said, if someone wants to come work with you, tell us a little bit about what it's like, in your therapy practice and what your specialties are. Give us the whole spiel.
Sure. So right now I'm fully virtual and I'm licensed in New York and New Jersey. So if you are in New Jersey, New York, you can come see me. I'm hoping to have an in-person space, but that's a little further down the line. So my practice, I meet with my clients virtually, like I said, for sessions are usually 45 minutes. My specialty, I work mostly with young adults. And when I say young adults, I mean like 18 to mid 30s. And I specialize in helping them, people, whether they're sober curious, they want to moderate, or they want to be completely sober. So anything in the substance misuse field. I also help people with anxiety and then some disordered eating as well.
Lovely. You are just a bundle of resources for people in need. So I appreciate you being here today and sharing all of the things. And all of that being said, Kendall, is there any final message you would love to leave with the audience today?
I think, if anything, it's just that there's a whole wide world out there to live outside of using substances. And in fact, the world becomes so much larger when you stop using them. Like, if that's a problem for you, because my world shrunk down to when can I just drink next? And where can I drink? And when can I get it? And how can I hide it? And it takes up so much brain space. And so, if you are wanting to put an end to that and like start living your life for you instead of substances, you can do that. And I would just really encourage you to reach out for help. Like I needed help. I couldn't do it on my own. Most people can't do it on their own, whether it's AA, NA, in inpatient rehab, therapy. You can also find me. I'm taking new clients. So there's a lot out there to help you.
Yeah. Yeah, no one's alone out there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kendall. I appreciate you so much for being here and sharing all your wisdom.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And to those of you who are listening, go ahead and take a look at the description of this video to learn more about Kendall B Therapy, how to get in contact, and anything else that you would like to get questions answered. Go ahead and send me an email, hello@marinamars.com, and I will make sure to get you connected to where you need to be. As always, if you need anything, just let me know.